I'm sorry, Daniel, but this is just how it works now. The higher-ups need the books to look cleaner. That's what my supervisor, Mark, told me on a gray Wednesday morning as he slid the termination notice across the scratched surface of his desk. I was still in my Navy coveralls, grease on my hands from checking the ammonia pump only a couple hours earlier. His words sounded almost sympathetic, but he never met my eyes. Instead, he kept sneaking glances at the HR rep in the corner like she'd vanish if he blinked too long. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or demand answers. I just sat there for a beat, staring at the oil marks on the safety binder I'd brought in, then finally said, "So that's it." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "It's not personal. Budgets are tight. You'll get your last paycheck and vacation payout in the mail. Shouldn't take more than a few days." I nodded, picked up my things, and walked out into the flat gray light of the lot. That was the official story. The truth? I saw it the second I noticed the clipboard on Mark's desk, the one stamped "Priority, Sweep," because less than a week earlier, I'd submitted a full incident report on a hazardous leak in Line 3, with copies to the plant director and safety board. It wasn't a disaster, but it easily could have been. Everyone knew why. Cutbacks on maintenance, bargain bin replacements, and shortcuts passed off as fixes. I'd logged every warning, every check. That was my job. My name is Daniel Ortiz. I'm 49, and I spent 15 years working as a senior technician at Agrichem Processing in Des Moines, Iowa. Maybe you haven't heard of Agrichem, but if you've driven I-80, you've seen the silver tanks painted sky blue to look clean. I was the guy making sure those tanks didn't rupture, keeping the line moving for a crew of nearly 40. My record, 15 years without a single shutdown from an accident. Not once did I let something slide. I joined in my 30s, just a guy who loved machinery and knew the difference between a patch and a real repair. Over the years, I saw 3 different plant managers come and go, a revolving door of new hires, and safety posters stacking up faster than actual upgrades ever did. Still, I stuck it out because I believed in the work and in the folks who showed up every dawn no matter what. Things changed the morning I found a pale yellow puddle under a transfer line. I traced it back to a hairline crack in the valve housing, one we'd flagged weeks earlier. I checked the maintenance log. My signature was there. Immediate replacement recommended. High risk of corrosive leak. Nobody had signed off. Nobody had ordered the part. The only thing different was a new checked "OK" tag slapped on the pump. That shift, after clocking out, I sent a full incident report with photos, checklists, and sensor logs attached. I'd seen enough close calls to know to cover myself. Within 2 days, the leak doubled. I reported it again. And the very next morning, at 7:24, a toxic vapor alarm went off. We cleared the section, started emergency ventilation, and flushed the system. No one was hurt. Not that time. I figured it would end there, replace the valve, close the report, and keep moving. But 2 days later, Mark called me in and handed me my termination notice. "Just streamlining," he said. "You'll get what you're owed." Except I didn't. A week after leaving, I checked my account. Nothing from Agrichem. No paycheck, no vacation payout. I waited 2 more days. Still nothing. I called HR. "There's probably a processing delay," the woman on the phone said. "We'll look into it." That same afternoon, a heavy white envelope showed up in my mailbox. Return address, Agrichem Legal. Inside was a report addressed to OSHA. I knew it the second I saw the formatting. But it wasn't mine. This version claimed the chemical leak had been caused by operator negligence, and my name was highlighted on nearly every page. According to their narrative, I'd bypassed safety procedures and failed to escalate urgent maintenance issues. Buried in the legal jargon was the real threat: potential disqualification from future safety-sensitive employment under federal guidelines. Plain English? They wanted me blacklisted. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at those pages until the words blurred. I'd seen shady moves from companies before, but I never imagined they'd come after me personally. The anger that built inside me wasn't just for me. It was for every guy still clocking in at 5:30 a.m., trusting the system to have their back. But I wasn't defenseless. I had everything: the emails, signed checklists, sensor logs with timestamps. I'd printed hard copies and backed up the files to my own drive right after the leak. Photos of the cracked valve, close-ups of the corrosion, even a text from my shift lead confirming he'd seen my report and tried to escalate it. I wasn't about to roll over. Step 1. I filed 2 official complaints. One with OSHA for retaliation against a whistleblower, and one with the Iowa Department of Workforce Development for unpaid wages. I attached the lot emails, logs, my final time card. Step 2. I reached out to 3 people I trusted: Sam from night shift, Maria from QA, and Tony from maintenance. I told them everything. If anyone asks, "Will you stand by me?" All 3 said yes without hesitation. Tony added, "We all knew Mark was covering his ass. I watched him dump your report in the shredder." Maria forwarded me her QA logs from that week. And Sam, who'd been in the control room when the alarm blared, offered to testify that the system triggered exactly as I'd reported. Step 3. I called a local news producer I knew through my daughter's soccer league. He covered industrial safety stories for the regional station. I handed him the photos, my original report, and the doctored version. A week later, the story aired on the 6 o'clock news. Technician claims retaliation after reporting chemical leak. Agrichem spokesperson denied everything, but the segment rolled my photos and sensor data right on screen. That's when the gears really started turning. The union's legal fund assigned me an attorney, who immediately filed a defamation suit against Agrichem, naming both Mark and the HR manager. Sitting across from him in his office for the first time, I remember him saying, "You did everything by the book. Now let's make them prove otherwise." A few days after that broadcast, OSHA inspectors showed up at the plant unannounced. They uncovered 7 major violations: missing safety guards, outdated chemical logs, and a pile of completed maintenance jobs that had never been touched. That section of the facility was shut down for inspection. Management was rattled. The regional news kept hammering the story, and the union staged a demonstration outside the main gate. Within a week, Agrichem's largest client, a food packaging company out of Chicago, put their contract on indefinite hold. Word spread about possible layoffs. Meanwhile, I got a call from across town. The safety director of a competing chemical plant said, "We saw your story. You open to talking? We could use someone who knows how to keep a place safe." I tried to sound steady when I answered, but inside I was nearly shaking with relief. I'd be glad to, but the fight wasn't over. The Iowa Department of Workforce Development ruled in my favor. Agrichem was ordered to pay my back wages in full, plus a 50% penalty for late payment, along with additional damages for emotional distress. OSHA hit the company hard. They cited Agrichem for multiple violations, falsifying safety records, retaliating against a whistleblower, and neglecting critical maintenance. The fine ran into 6 figures, and federal oversight was recommended for a minimum of 2 years. But the real turning point came in court. My lawyer laid out the maintenance logs, the emails, the photos, and the statements from Sam, Maria, and Tony. The judge didn't even let Agrichem's attorney finish cross-examination before ruling. Mr. Ortiz acted responsibly and in good faith to prevent a workplace hazard. The company's actions were retaliatory and defamatory. I order Agrichem to issue a public apology and pay damages. I took the job at the competing plant across town, this time as head of safety. My first order of business was rewriting every reporting protocol. No more sweeping problems under the rug. A year later, I was invited to speak at a regional safety conference. I told the audience, document everything, save your records. It might not just save your career, it could save lives. The right thing is rarely the easy thing, but if you stick with it, the truth eventually comes out. The first morning at my new job felt nothing like the last 15 years. The alarm still went off at 5:30, but there was no knot in my stomach. I brewed coffee, buttoned a fresh shirt that still smelled faintly of the store, and drove across town to the rival chemical plant, a place I used to know only from highway billboards and secondhand stories. Now, because of everything that had happened, I was walking through their gates as the new head of safety and compliance. I half expected someone to give me side-eye, to whisper about the lawsuits, the news stories, or Mark's threats. Instead, the security guard handed me a new badge with a smile. "Welcome aboard, Daniel." For the first time in months, I actually believed it. The learning curve was steep. Every plant has its own quirks, its own hazards, and unspoken rules about who you can trust. That first week was all paperwork, long walks through the floor, jotting down lists of safety equipment and maintenance records, noticing the little things most people ignored. But everywhere I went, people seemed open, willing to talk. A couple of operators even admitted they'd seen my story on the news. Only now, the tone was respect, not suspicion. One of them pressed a hard hat into my hands and said, "Heard you stood up when it counted. Takes guts." For once, doing the right thing wasn't being punished. Still, some nights I lay awake replaying the chaos of those last weeks at Agrichem. The meetings, the shouting, the empty promises about paychecks, the way old friends avoided me in the lunchroom, afraid they'd be next. Some scars don't fade quickly. But now I wasn't carrying them alone. Meanwhile, the legal process dragged on, slow but steady. The union's lawyers kept me posted. OSHA's audit expanded into a full-scale review, shutting down half the plant for almost 2 months. Old colleagues reached out, sometimes to vent, sometimes for advice. I told them what I'd learned the hard way. Keep everything. Every email, every checklist, every log. Trust is fine, I'd say, but proof is better. The day the final judgment came through, I was elbow-deep in a valve inspection at my new plant. My phone buzzed with a text from the union lawyer. "Daniel, we won. Back pay, penalties, and a public apology. It's over." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. After months of fighting, it almost didn't feel real. I typed a quiet thank you, then set the phone down and finished the inspection. The plant still had to run. The following week, my former employer's official apology appeared in the city paper and on their website. It was stiff and legalistic. "We regret the circumstances that led to Mr. Ortiz's termination," but that wasn't what stuck with people. What people remembered was the local TV coverage, the union's press release, and that grainy shot of my handwritten maintenance logs with the dates circled in red. The real story had already traveled across the industry, through breakroom chatter, backyard cookouts, union halls, and HR training slides. If you want to keep a disaster off your hands, hire someone like Daniel Ortiz and listen to what he tells you. A few months later, Agrichem was still reeling. The fines hurt, sure, but the deeper wound was reputational. Their largest client kept the contract on indefinite hold. Another walked away entirely. I'm sure some people blamed me, but most knew the truth. The cracks in that company had started long before the leak. I didn't take satisfaction in their pain, but I didn't feel guilt either. Meanwhile, my new job settled into a rhythm. We revamped inspection protocols, introduced digital logbooks, and rolled out regular safety workshops. Simple fixes, really, but they added up. After a while, nobody was whispering about the old scandal anymore. We were just focused on the work. That's the way I liked it. The biggest surprise came in the spring, nearly a year after I'd been fired. OSHA held its annual industry conference in St. Louis, and I was invited to speak. The room was full, plant managers, safety officers, even a couple of reporters in the back. I kept my notes short. I didn't drag my old boss or the lawsuits into it. I just told the story straight. If you're the one holding the checklist, the logbook, the midnight email, hang on to them. If you've got the authority to fix something, don't wait. And if anyone tells you to look the other way, remember this. One day it could be your name on the report or your family on the news. Documentation doesn't just protect your company. It protects you, and it might save a life. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand, swap stories, or just thank me for saying out loud what they'd felt themselves. A younger technician from a plant near Cedar Rapids stopped me as I was leaving. He thanked me for not sugarcoating it and asked if I'd look over their maintenance logs. I told him I'd be glad to. That, more than any settlement check or official apology, felt like closure. Life didn't snap back overnight, but it steadied. In my garage, I still kept my old hard hat hung on a hook, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Doing the right thing costs you, sometimes more than you expect. But there are things, your integrity, your peace of mind, that are worth every ounce of that cost. Now, whenever a new hire asks why we're obsessive about documentation, or why I insist we triple-check the emergency shutoff drills, I just grin and say, it's not paranoia. It's making sure the next Daniel Ortiz doesn't have to fight the same battles alone. Starting over wasn't seamless. Some days muscle memory betrayed me. I'd reach for a handle in the new plant where there was none, or glance at a wall clock expecting to hear Mark's sarcastic bark, "Pick it up, Ortiz." But slowly those ghosts faded, and I found myself waking up actually looking forward to work, instead of dreading it. At home, the changes were even clearer. My wife, Marisol, finally stopped checking the mailbox every afternoon for letters from attorneys or overdue notices. She'd gotten used to the stress, the constant calls, the fear my career would never recover, the dread that I'd been blacklisted for good. But now she laughed more. Sometimes she'd slip an arm around me and whisper, "Feels like I've got my husband back." And she was right, she did. The settlement money from the lawsuit wasn't life-changing, but it made a difference. We traded in the beat-up old pickup, patched up the roof that had been leaking for years, and even took a weekend trip down to the Ozarks. Just Marisol and me, a small lakeside cabin, a fire pit, and the quiet kind of peace that only comes after you've weathered a storm. But the real payoff was something no check could buy. I got my self-respect back. I could walk into a room, look someone in the eye, and know I hadn't folded when it mattered. Marisol used to tease me that I was the most famous whistleblower on the block. I'd laugh, but deep down I sometimes thought about how close I'd come to just keeping my head down, letting it slide. If I had, maybe I'd still have my old job, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Work at the new plant kept me busy. We had our share of headaches, plugged lines, aging pumps, surprise inspections, the usual budget juggling. But there was one key difference. Problems didn't get buried. When someone spotted corrosion, it went on the record, and I listened. When a new operator flagged an odd pressure reading, nobody told him to quit worrying. We fixed it, logged it, and moved on. Some of my old crew from Des Moines reached out too. I helped them however I could, not out of revenge, but because I knew what it felt like to be left twisting in the wind. A couple even came over to work with me. One of them, Carlos, brought his teenage son on Take Your Kid to Work Day. "This is Daniel," he told the boy. "He's the reason I'm still doing this job." My throat tightened hearing that. Word of my story kept bouncing around the industry. I started getting invited to safety panels, union Zoom calls, even guest spots at the local tech college. I never pretended to be some hero. I just told the truth I'd learned the hard way. Standing up for safety is never just about valves and pumps. It's about protecting the people who trust you to get them home alive at the end of every shift. It was at one of those talks at a small community college when it really hit me how far things had come. A young woman in the front row, maybe 19, clutching a spiral notebook full of highlighted checklists, raised her hand. "Mr. Ortiz, my uncle says speaking up just gets you fired. Did you ever wish you'd kept quiet?" I let the question hang before answering. "No," I said. Sure, there were days I was scared, but if you let fear make your choices, you end up stuck, and things only get worse. Find the right allies, keep your records, and don't let anyone tell you your safety or your integrity isn't worth fighting for. Afterward, she came up to thank me. I saw the same mix of worry and hope in her eyes that I'd carried through those long months, and I realized stories like mine aren't just warnings. They're proof you can survive, even grow, after choosing the hard, right path. A year rolled by. My old plant never really bounced back. Their biggest clients kept their distance. Some of the worst managers slipped quietly into retirement. Others got shuffled elsewhere. The company promised a new era of transparency, but for most employees, it was too little, too late. Meanwhile, safety numbers at my new plant started climbing. Other companies began reaching out, asking for advice on modernizing their protocols. I even wrote a short piece for an industry newsletter, not flashy, just a checklist and a few lines about why details matter. It spread faster than I expected, quoted in meetings, even landing me an invite to a roundtable in Chicago. That summer, OSHA invited me back to speak at their national conference. This time, instead of a side room, my session was on the main stage. Marisol sat front row, smiling so wide I thought her cheeks might hurt. I closed my talk with the same advice I'd given 100 times, but this time I knew people were really hearing it. My routine stayed the same. Early mornings, strong coffee, logbook checks, walking the floor, talking to every crew, double-checking gauges myself. Old habits, maybe, but maybe also the ones that keep people safe. Sometimes I drive past the old agrichem plant, glance at the faded sign, and think about all I'd lost. But then I'd touch the badge clipped to my shirt, remember all the people who had stood by me, and realize how much I'd gained. Maybe that's what winning really means. Not getting back everything you lost, but knowing deep down you never gave up the things that mattered most.